Hi, I'm director CJ Powers. And tonight, on a director's take, you're going to get a director's take on director Jeremy Lynch. Not only tonight are we going to talk about him as far as what he experienced from his very first film all the way through to his current ventures, but we're going to do something special. We're going to give you a bonus, and at the end of this show, we will play his first film in its entirety. But for that, you need to be able to stick around. Let's get started. Hey, Jeremy, welcome to the show.
Hey, CJ, thanks for having me on.
Glad you were able to make it. You know, when we had first talked about you being on the show, I couldn't help but think about that story you shared, where as a young go-getter filmmaker, you knew exactly what you were going to do. You went out to the sand dunes to shoot some action-adventure scenes. You came back all proud of the footage. You let me see it, and there wasn't enough footage. Do you want to tell me what you learned about coverage from this experience?
Yes, I'll be happy to share that. So, it was my first film, The Scavenger, and we actually got our cast and crew to travel 2 states away because apparently they don't have any deserts in the Midwest. We found ourselves a little beach in Michigan where we were able to fake it and make it look like a desert. And with all the traveling involved, I did all the preparations that I knew how to do. I actually watched the movie in my head like 2 or 3 times a day in preparation for this. I wanted to make sure that I knew every shot that I wanted for the final film. And I left knowing that there were some shots that I didn't get, but thinking I had enough to still make the movie, right? What I didn't realize was how much the film changes when you're editing it. It looks perfect in your head when you're watching it, but then when it's real and it's an actual movie, you go, oh crap, I didn't get a shot to take us from here to there, or I didn't get a backup shot, when we cut away from that close-up, kind of a thing. And we ended up going back and doing another 3 days of shooting. We did 1 full day of production with the full cast and crew because we knew that was really all we were going to get from them. It was a very tired crew at this point, very dedicated crew, but they've been through a lot. So
Sure.
we went back. We knew that we were going to go. We scheduled 3 more shoot days. One was with the full crew, and then we did another one with just me, the cinematographer, and the production designer. And I actually became the stunt double for the main character. So there's some shots there where it's actually me wearing the costume. You just can't see the guy's face. So there's another one where the production designer, she wore the costume of another character, and we reenacted one of the fights because we wanted to get a couple more coverage shots of that fight.
Wow.
Make sure we got the pacing right. And so, we ended up just doing, basically doing what we could to trick the camera by adding in all of these extra shots. But by doing that, we were able to get the pacing that we wanted. We were able to get the look. We were able to hit the right marks tone-wise so that every shot was moving the story forward, but not lingering too long, if that makes sense.
Oh, it definitely makes sense. One of the things I think the audience needs to know and understand is the fact that when you shoot the action sequences, most of the time it's done by a second unit team so that they can do nothing but focus on action, 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 action. But when you're doing it with your principal photography team, you have to worry about dialogue and actors and all kinds of things, which just totally changes things. They say that the principal photography team, the A team, usually takes 3 times longer to do action than what the B team does because they're so used to it. Did you have any experiences like that where you noticed that when your stars were present, it took longer to shoot versus when you or the other person got dressed up in the garb?
Yeah, I did. So to speak to that, I didn't have a second unit. And what's cool is now that since I've shot this film, I've really gotten connected with some key players in the stunts community here in the Chicagoland area. And it's really cool to see how a stunt coordinator puts that together for a B team. It's almost like you having somebody who specializes in fighting and action directing the action sequences. So it makes sense why so many productions do that. In my case, yes, absolutely, I noticed the difference because it was just literally me, one other person, and the cameraman, and we're like,
But isn't
this is
that, here's the thing about that. While that sounds like it was a thrown together thing, you and I both know that often the second unit team is directed by the DP.
yes,
So, sometimes it's not, sometimes there's an extra director depending on the budget, but in most cases it's the DP that ends up directing the second unit. So it's kind of like a trimmed down A team is actually the B team.
yeah, and there's this whole thing to say about too many chefs in the kitchen, right? That's a
Sure.
bad analogy. But basically, when you have fewer people to direct and all of those people know what they're doing, you get faster results. And I can speak to that with an example from another film I worked on, where the first day we had a much bigger crew. And on the second day, and we were just really fighting and struggling to keep up with the schedule. We ended up going 3 or 4 hours past our scheduled end time. The next day, we literally had almost 10 people less on the crew, and we just flew through the day. To the point where we were done with scenes and we had to sit around for hours to wait for the sunlight to be right for the next scene. And it just, when you having more people doesn't always make things move faster, but having people who know what they're doing always gets you in a better place.
Oh, yeah, definitely agree with that. One of the things that I noticed with your show is that you had a kind of cool poster that reminded me of some of the special effects scenes. But I also noticed later on there was a little film festival certificate showing up there.
So sadly, I only have one festival laurel, and that's not for, that doesn't speak against the film. That just speaks against me and how tired I was after I made the film.
how few festivals you actually entered.
Yeah, I would have entered a lot more, but once everything was said and done, I just didn't have the motivational force anymore. But the festivals that I did enter, I placed well in, and one of them I took home the People's Choice Award. In fact, at
Very
that
good.
festival, I remember the whole room was screaming and cheering and reacting to the film. And I love watching people watch The Scavenger because there are so many moments that make people physically react while they're watching it. I'll never forget at the first premiere event that I did for the film, I actually went and stood in the back of the room so I could watch people as they reacted. And I'll never forget, there was one moment where my dad nearly jumped out of his seat during
Wow.
a scene. And that was just such a satisfying feeling to know that I had elicited such a reaction out of him
Well,
from the.
and I think you make a valid point. Film, people forget that film is an emotional medium. And that's so different from video or books and so on. Now, books, of course, can get into the person's head where film cannot. Film is very visual, but it's definitely an emotional medium. And sometimes we see that when we're talking about music and sound effects. But before we talk about any of that, we have to back up a moment. I know you brought a couple clips for us to see. I would
Sure.
like to talk a little bit about the special effects and also the stunts and stuff just a little bit. But let's start out here by showing one of your clips, and let's see what this one is. So as they were running and you go to this expansive long shot, I don't know if those were silos or a building off to the one side, big power lines off to the other, and you just got done saying that this was at a beach. So clearly those things didn't exist there. Do you want to talk about how you did the special effects?
Sure. So, so far every film that I've directed has had visual effects to some extent, and I was very fortunate in that early on in my interest in becoming a filmmaker, I happened to cross paths with a guy who does visual effects for a living, and he's worked on movies and video games, and has taught the field to many professionals. And I've just been blessed to have a good friend who gives me pointers in this area. We had, for the majority of the shots on this film, we actually had students work on the visual effects, but having that professional supervisor to kind of give me some direction in the planning stages, as well as in kind of supervising some of the post work, really made a big difference. Most of the visual effects that I've done in my films has been set extension. So in this case, it was adding power lines or removing Lake Michigan, things like that, just trying to create the sense that we're in the middle of a decimated world and not on a beach.
Well, I think you pulled it off quite well.
Thank you. What I find, what's interesting, and I'll tell this to anybody who's interested in directing a film and having some visual effects in the film, is when I talk to visual effects people, they refer to a process they call the rule of 5. Sometimes it's the rule of 8. Sometimes it's the rule of 10. Just depends on who's directing or producing the film. Basically, the rule is this: the director meets with the VFX supervisor at the beginning, whether that's the before they shoot or whether that's after they wrap. But the director tells the supervisor, we're going to need 50 visual effects shots on this film, or we're going to need 100 VFX shots on this film. Tells the VFX supervisor a certain number. And typically, that number multiplies by 5 by the end of the post-production process. Because you go back and you go, oh, you know what? Can you fix this? Can you fix that? Oh, we need this. Oh, that shot didn't work out as well as I thought. Can we fix that? And I pride myself in that I typically land either right at or slightly below the number that I say at the beginning of the production. And I think why that is because I'm very dedicated to fleshing everything out ahead of time. I've done a film recently where I didn't quite go through all of my pre-production process and kind of felt that on the set. A few things took longer than they should have, but when you do have a vision for the film, it's your responsibility to flesh that out and put it into all the simplest terms that you can. Yeah. Right? You watch that movie. Actually, you taught me this, CJ. You watch that movie in your head 100 times. You told me no less than 100 times. You watch that movie, you find time. You watch that movie in your head 100 times before you roll the camera. And while you're going through, because that's going to inform you when you're going through your shot list. It's going to inform you when you're meeting with your VFX supervisor, when you're meeting with your actors. You're going to know exactly what blocking you need. And more importantly, you're going to know why. because you've seen it so many times. You've had a chance to pick apart, why does doing it this way work versus doing it any other way?
Yeah.
You know, and knowing the why in film production, or when you're collaborating with your DP and your crew, really makes the big difference. It's more
And
about knowing the what than, or knowing the why than knowing the what.
by all means, although I do want to add to that one little piece. I was talking to a gentleman the other day who was telling me 10 to 15% of their effect shots are added to the show after the lawyers look at the film and decide what can stay in the frame and what cannot stay in the frame.
It's absolutely true. I was told about this movie my friend was working on. He told me that it was going to have a dragon, that it was going to have a mermaid morphing into a human. So I'm expecting all these cool action shots. He shows me the shots he's working on, and it's a sign on a wall that he has to remove the text and make it say something else. And that was the majority of the shots. Actually, there were more shots of taking things out of the background than there were actually putting things in. I was fascinated by this.
Well, we've talked enough about special effects. We need to talk about stunts a little bit. And I know you gave me a clip here that I believe has a little bit of a battle in it. So let's take a look at that right now. Oh, fight scenes, stunts.
Fight scenes, they're fun to watch, but you wouldn't believe what we do to make them work.
Yeah, a lot of fast cutting on different camera angles, and uh, I think sound effects nowadays plays more role in fight scenes than the actual visuals.
Absolutely, I would not disagree with that. Um, yeah, so what do you want to know about this scene? Or about the process of doing the stunts?
Well, I was thinking from the standpoint of a young filmmaker that is excited to do some kind of action show. What does it take for you to coordinate a series of stunts for like a fight scene or a gun shootout or whatever it might be?
Takes a very um, close attention to safety more than anything. Safety is the most important thing when you're doing stunts, when you're doing action. It's a deal breaker if you can't have safety. It it doesn't matter how much an actor tells me they want to do the dangerous thing. If it's not safe, we're going to change the shot. We're going to change the scene. Safety is the first and foremost thing. At the time I made this movie, I didn't really have connections with any stunt coordinators or stunt actors like I do today. All I had was my own experience having had a little bit of staged combat training, where they went through a lot of safety and a lot of different techniques to make the fight look real. Um, so I choreographed the fights in this movie myself. Sometimes you can tell, but it was definitely an experience to be the director and the stunt coordinator, and it really came down to the actors and how well they took on and made the choreography come to life. And fortunately, to help us, Derek L. Cook, who's a great actor, you should absolutely hire him. He was playing the big guy in that fight scene. He actually has a black belt in, I believe, multiple martial arts.
Wow.
Uh, and he was ready and rearing to go for a bigger fight scene, actually. But I was very happy with the results of what he did in making this fight look and feel real. Playing against Tyler and his reactions as well.
Sure.
Tyler Evans played the protagonist in this film, and he did just a wonderful job. I thought he knows how to carry a film, and just how to have a presence on stage and with the camera. It was great.
Yeah, that sounds fantastic. Okay, so we've talked a little bit about the show itself. One of the things I'm always curious about is the business behind the director. Because as you know, in this day and age, I think every single director I know has their own company. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your company, how you came up with the name, and
Sure.
what you're trying to accomplish with it?
Mm-hmm. So my company is Broken Hero Entertainment, and to me, it just speaks to some of the things I love about story and some of the stories that I love the most. Is really about overcoming your own brokenness because we're all broken. Let's not pretend like anybody's really got their life together. But stories about overcoming your own insecurities or overcoming those own internal battles are great. But I also love stories where somebody has to overcome more than that. Sometimes, I've always been fascinated by by the war movie where you got the guy who's got a few bullet holes in him. He's probably about to die, but he stands back up and he fights anyway.
Yeah.
And it's because of the cause that he's fighting for, the person that he has to protect, is motivating him. So to me, there's something very beautiful in that, and so many different approaches you can take to that, whether it's the internal conflict story or whether it's an external conflict story. I'm always rooting for the broken hero, and I really wanted to embrace that looking at my entertainment company, because so much of my storytelling revolves around redemption and revolves around overcoming, just overcoming that internal conflict.
I think the best stories not only have an external conflict that we can see, especially like in your action film, but has that internal conflict where we see the main character grow. And that
Yeah.
growth factor sometimes is what causes people to watch the movie a second time. I don't think I've ever seen it where people have watched a movie a second time because of the action, but I have seen it where they've watched the movie a second time because there's depth to that action. For instance, the Fast and Furious series. People
Mhm.
were watching it because of that whole brotherhood and family connection, not because of the action. Of course, yeah, they all went there because the action looks great on the big screen and they enjoyed it all. But they watched it over and over again because of the character development and how that tied together. So I think what you're saying about, the broken hero overcoming is a fantastic idea. So it's certainly a wonderful choice for your company.
Absolutely.
All right, so I'm checking out my list here of things because time is fleeing, and I would like to talk just about a couple other quick things. First of all, you not only do film production, but you have now, thanks to COVID probably, we've all had to diversify and do additional things. You're now also doing wedding videos. So I have a clip here from one of your highlight reels. Let's show that and then let's talk about it.
And in the routine of ordinary life, the extraordinary has happened. They met each other, fell in love, and finalized it with their wedding.
The support you have shown one another in times of stress is a testament of true love. One can only aspire to have a connection so genuine and pure.
Okay, I have to say that reminded me far more of a movie than a wedding. I guess that's what you can bring to the table as a director. Tell us a little bit about your wedding process, or how your business is moving in that direction.
Yeah, absolutely. And storytelling and film techniques do play a huge part in what I do with my wedding videos. One thing I will say is there's nothing that compares to having an experienced wedding videographer. You can have an experienced commercial videographer. You can have an experienced uh, vlog videographer, and they'll come into the wedding and it's not the same. Once you get through several weddings and you understand the process, you realize, okay, film school didn't prepare me for this. Uh, so what I've done on multiple occasions now is I've brought a film school student with me to a wedding, or I've brought a commercial DP with me to a wedding, and kind of showed them the ropes, because a lot of it is actually counterintuitive to what they teach you in film school. But it's great because what I love about it is bringing in that storytelling aspect when I'm sitting down editing. I can find from the footage that I took that day, and I can find from the speeches or something that the priest said during the ceremony, bits and pieces that I can put together into a story. And it's also helps when you know the couple a little bit and they tell you the story about how they met and how they built up to this moment, what's important to them. It's but being able to create that experience for them, and create and capture an emotion for them that they'll still experience when they watch it 10 years from now, 20 years from now, 30 years from now. I mean, heck, they're going to show this to their kids. Hopefully their kids are going to show it to their grandkids. It's becomes a thing of, will this stand the test of time, this little video, right? And my theory is that if I focus on the story, that something is going to age well, and this video, this little experience I'm creating, is still going to hold up 10 or 20 or hopefully 30 or more years from now, so that that couple and that family can subsequently continue to enjoy that wedding day.
Well, certainly getting into the wedding business is a new thing for me to hear from you. I started out as a still photographer in the wedding business, but soon as I had the opportunity to shift over to motion, now that was back in the days when photography was very different. Today, of course, with everything digital, I don't think you see a normal picture that hasn't been touched up in some way, shape, or form anymore in this day and age. But certainly, we do the same thing with our films. You know, we always want the best image. We want the thing that produces the most emotions and so on. So I'm glad you're getting into that. But let's get back to your film now. I think we have a little bit of time left, so I want you to introduce your film, and then we're going to give this nice bonus to the people. We're going to let them watch the entire film in its original form. How about introducing it?
Before we dive into the Scavenger, CJ, would you mind if I threw a little bonus in here?
I'm all for bonuses. Did you give me an extra little clip that you didn't tell me about?
Yeah, so I wanted to take a minute and talk about the film I have in post-production right now.
Okay.
It's called Keep Moving. And I co-directed this film with the illustrious actress Joanna Fabergé, who's a good friend of mine. And this was her first directing experience. So when she took on the project, she tagged me and said, I know you know directing. Can you help me do this? And the two
That's
of
great.
us.
That's great.
And normally I say no to co-directing roles, just because I tend to be very, I tend to be very committed to my vision, and sometimes it's very hard to share vision with another human being who has a completely different vision.
Yeah.
But I will say that working with Joanna on this production in this capacity was a fantastic experience, and both of us were very on the same page most of the time, which was refreshing.
All right. Well, let's watch the clip.
Sure.
Camera speeds, roll sound. Sound speed. Marker. Scene 8A, take 2, marker.
From now on, we all stick together.
Last night, I woke up and I heard him playing with something. I don't know what it was. He's acting weird. We need to be careful.
I found these in your sleeping bag. Are these why we can't remember anything?
Hey, get your hands off me. You need to calm down.
Okay, you got me peaked. When is that film coming out?
So it's in post-production right now. We don't have a specific timeline for when the release is yet, but it will be very soon, hopefully in the next few months.
Well, fantastic. Well, let us know so we can update the website so people will know where and how to get a hold of that. Okay, so now it's time for the treat of them watching your very first film as it was originally intended. Intro it.
So, The Scavenger. This takes place after World War III. The world has been decimated. People are just rising up out of the ashes, trying to survive. And in this new climate and in this new post-apocalyptic world, the thing people need most is water. Nobody trusts anyone. People fight for every scrap, and you're about to see them fight over every drop.
Bravo, bravo.
Thank you.
Well, Jeremy, our time is up. Thank you so much for coming on the show. Is there one last piece of information or encouragement you can give to new directors or directors who have maybe changed fields? What tip can you leave us with?
At the beginning and the end of the day, it's all about story. It's all about that character and the journey they go on and how they're different at the end of it.
I, of course, have to agree wholeheartedly. That's what it's all about for me, anyway. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us today. Have a great evening.